The research library was nearly empty that night. Only the faint hum of the fluorescent lights accompanied the sound of my footsteps. I had been preparing slides for my upcoming presentation on pediatric trauma protocols, sifting through medical records. Dust clung to every page, the scent of aging paper filling the air, like something that had been forgotten for too long. That was when my hand brushed against a folder that didn't belong. Wedged deep in the bottom of a filing cabinet, hidden beneath stacks of accident reports from the 1960s, was a thin envelope sealed with brittle wax. The name scrawled across the front in shaky handwriting made me pause. Dr. Alan Carter, personal confession, the case of Emily Harper. My pulse quickened. I knew the name Carter, an emergency physician whose career stretched across 4 decades, mentioned in old journals. But this envelope, untouched and sealed for nearly 40 years, seemed more like something from a confessional than a medical record. I hesitated before breaking the seal. The room seemed to grow colder, as though the air itself wanted to warn me away. When I unfolded the yellowed paper, the words leaped out like whispers from a grave. This is the case that has made my whole life a nightmare. The handwriting trembled with the weight of decades. My throat tightened as I read the date, 1985, his last day at work, the day of his retirement. The more I read, the more I felt an invisible presence behind me, watching. The library's silence deepened, stretching taut, like the pause before a scream. Shadows seemed longer, the fluorescent lights flickering, as though disturbed by the dead man's confession. Carter described the tornado, the sisters, the strangers, the vanishing. But it wasn't only what he wrote, it was how. His words were filled with dread, not just guilt. He had feared something greater, something beyond human explanation. When I reached the end, I realized my hands were trembling. The page slipped from my grasp and floated to the floor, the words echoing in my mind. Emily, wherever you are, I pray that you are safe and happy. Some secrets follow you for a lifetime. And in that moment, I swore I heard it, a child's laugh, faint and hollow, echoing through the stacks. May 12, 1946. Dr. Carter's words dragged me into that night, painting images I wished I could erase. The storm arrived like a beast loosed from hell. It began with a low, guttural roar that grew louder, drowning out prayers and screams alike. The Wilburton sky turned black, clouds twisting in unnatural shapes. Then, with the force of a god's fist, the F5 tornado ripped through the town. Houses folded like paper. Trains were tossed from their tracks. Entire neighborhoods disappeared into a spiral of dust, glass, and fire. At Wilburton General Hospital, the injured poured in endlessly, limbs torn, skulls fractured, eyes wide with terror. The air was heavy with blood and smoke. Dr. Carter, just 29, worked frantically with shaking hands. Every corridor was chaos, gurneys colliding, families wailing, children clinging to lifeless parents. And in the middle of it all, the Harper sisters arrived. Ella, 9 years old, was carried in with a deep wound on her temple, her small body shaking with shock. Yet she was conscious, whispering her mother's name through tears. Emily, her 5-year-old sister, walked beside the stretcher, untouched physically but blank, her eyes fixed on nothing. No tears, no words, just silence, as though the storm had taken something more than flesh from her. Their mother, Grace Harper, had been crushed beneath the rubble. Their stepfather clung to life in the operating theater. The sisters had no one left. Dr. Carter wrote that he could not forget Emily's stare. While nurses hurried around, stitching wounds and pressing bandages, Emily sat on a chair in the corner, unmoving. Her face was pale, her lips colorless. It was, Carter confessed, as though she had already crossed into another world. The electricity flickered, windows rattled. Even inside the hospital walls, the tornado's rage made the building groan like it would collapse. The storm had ended lives, but it had also birthed something stranger, an atmosphere thick with dread. And in that stormlit night, when Carter turned his gaze away from Emily, he swore he saw shadows stretching unnaturally long across the walls. One of them shaped like a man, though no one stood there. It lasted only a moment, but it was enough. By the time the winds subsided, Wilburton lay in ruins. Hundreds were dead. And the Harper girls' nightmare was only beginning. The storm outside had finally passed, but inside Wilburton General Hospital, chaos still raged. The morgue overflowed. Families sobbed in crowded hallways. Nurses moved like ghosts through smoke-stained corridors, carrying trays of blood-soaked bandages. It was in that confusion that they appeared. 2 men, dressed in dark suits and long coats despite the heat of the May evening, stepped through the hospital doors. Their shoes made no sound against the tile floor. They carried themselves with a calmness that seemed out of place in a building overflowing with grief. One of them held a leather briefcase, the other a slim folder pressed against his chest. They claimed to be from St. Joseph's Hospital in Oklahoma City. Their voices were polite, their manners careful, almost rehearsed. They presented identification, papers official stamped, convincing Dr. Carter, exhausted and overwhelmed, admitted later that something about them unsettled him, though he could not name why. Their attention was immediate and precise. "Emily Harper, we've come for the younger girl," the taller man said, his voice smooth, nearly soothing. "Arrangements have already been made." Carter objected at once. If Emily was to be transferred, then Ella, her injured, fragile, go with her. The two men exchanged a look, then nodded as if it hardly mattered. They agreed to take them both. Nurses whispered uneasily as the men approached the Harper sisters. Ella, though weak, resisted. She clutched Emily's hand, tears streaming down her bloodied face. Emily did not resist at all. She simply rose, her eyes empty, and followed like a sleepwalker. Carter described the moment in chilling detail, how the fluorescent lights above flickered as Emily stepped forward, how the temperature of the room seemed to dip, how even the sounds of chaos dimmed around her. They were polite, he wrote, but their politeness was unnatural, as if it masked something darker. I felt as though I had handed those children into the care of shadows. Carter stood at the doors as the sisters were led away. Ella turned, struggling against her tears, and waved weakly. Emily did not look back. She sat perfectly still in the back seat of the black car, her pale face reflecting in the window as the vehicle disappeared into the night. That was the last time Dr. Carter ever saw Emily Harper. And with their departure, the true nightmare began. The night was far from over. Hours after the Harper sisters had been escorted into the stranger's car, Dr. Carter finished his rounds and finally allowed himself a moment of rest. He told himself the girls were safe, that their transfer was routine. Yet something gnawed at him, a cold unease that refused to loosen its grip. By midnight, he could no longer ignore it. Carter picked up the phone and dialed St. Joseph's Hospital in Oklahoma City. The line crackled with static before a weary operator answered. "This is Dr. Alan Carter from Wilburton General," he said, voice taut with fatigue. "To pediatric patients were transferred earlier this evening. Anna Emily Harper. Can you confirm their arrival?" There was a pause, shuffling of papers, a second voice joining the line, then silence. Finally, the operator replied, "Doctor, we have no record of those children. No transfers tonight. No staff sent to Wilburton." Carter's blood ran cold. He demanded answers. He described the men, their documents, their mannerisms. But the more he spoke, the clearer the truth became. There were no such doctors. There had been no transfer request. The identification was counterfeit. The girls had been taken. Panic clawed at his chest. He called the police, then the FBI. Soon, agents arrived, combing through the hospital records and questioning every nurse and orderly. But the trail was already dissolving into the night. The black car was gone, the men faceless shadows in memory. Hours later, first sliver of dawn cut across the wreckage of Wilburton. Carter stood outside the hospital, the smell of smoke and dust choking the air. Somewhere out there, Ella and Emily were lost. By mid-morning news arrived. Ella had been found. She was discovered at a remote highway rest area, dazed, injured, but alive. She repeated only one thing to the officers who rescued her: wouldn't stop talking about Emily. They only wanted Emily. Emily was gone. Carter wrote that from that moment forward, a sense of failure haunted him. Every hallway echoed with the sound of a little girl's silence. Every night, he replayed that moment, the black car pulling away, the child who never looked back. And sometimes, in the lonely hours before dawn, he swore he could hear the tires of that car crunching gravel outside his window. Even decades after that night, the kidnapping of Emily Harper consumed the days and nights that followed. The FBI swarmed Wilburton like vultures over a battlefield, their agents piecing through rubble, questioning survivors, and chasing a trail that seemed to evaporate at every turn. Dr. Carter sat through hours of interrogation. They replayed his every word, dissected his every decision. "Describe the men again," they demanded. "Were they armed? Did they know the girls? Why did you let them leave?" He repeated the same answers until his throat went dry. Two men, well-dressed, polite, convincing. One tall, one shorter. Perfect papers. Calm voices. But beneath it all, Carter admitted to the agents, Something about them hadn't felt human. The FBI did not entertain talk of unnatural impressions. They wanted facts, not instincts. But the nurses echoed his unease. It was like they knew exactly who to look for. One said. Another whispered. Emily followed them like she'd been waiting for them. The agents uncovered the abandoned car weeks later, hidden in a wooded area outside Its license plates were false. The interior smelled faintly of chloroform. Blood-small traces was found on the seatbelt. It matched Ella, not Emily. The trail ended there. Meanwhile, Ella remained hospitalized, fragile and haunted. Carter visited her one evening, sitting quietly by her bedside. When she finally spoke, her words froze him. They kept whispering to Emily. They said she was special, that she didn't belong to us, that she had to go back. Carter pressed for details, but Ella began to tremble, her heart monitor spiking. Nurses rushed in to calm her, and the conversation was cut short. The FBI, despite its resources, made little progress. Some agents leaned toward the theory of black market adoption, citing post-war trafficking rings. Others suspected a personal vendetta, but Carter never believed it. There was no ransom, he wrote, no demands, just a girl taken with surgical precision. This was not an act of greed. It was something else. The official case file grew thicker each year, a mausoleum of dead leads. Yet Carter couldn't shake the sense that Emily was more than missing. She was hidden by forces that wanted her kept from the world. And late at night, when he finally closed his eyes, he dreamt of her face. Not the face of a child, but of a pale woman standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes, black and endless, whispering his name. Decades passed, yet the Harper case never loosened its grip on Dr. Carter's soul. He built his career on saving children, but no matter how many lives he touched, Emily's absence lingered like a shadow. By 1972, Carter was 45, older, respected, and yet plagued by sleepless nights. He described it as a haunting that no amount of medical triumphs could silence. Then, one morning, as he opened his office mailbox, he found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no date, no signature, only a typewritten message. Emily is safe. She has found a new family. She is living a happy life. Do not look for her. Carter's hands shook as he read it. The words were supposed to bring relief, but instead, they chilled him. It wasn't reassurance. It was a warning. The FBI tested the letter. No fingerprints. No traceable typewriter. No leads. They couldn't even confirm whether the message came from someone with true knowledge of the case, or from a cruel prankster. But Carter knew. Deep down, he felt the truth in it. Yet the comfort it offered was poisoned. Why had Emily needed a new family? Why the demand to stop searching? And who was watching him closely enough to know he had never given up the hunt? Not long after, Carter began to sense he was being followed. At first, it was small things. A dark sedan parked near his home. The same man at the corner cafe too. Many days in a row, a phone line that crackled with silence when he answered. One night, while working late at the hospital, Carter swore he heard a child's laugh echoed down the hallway. He followed it, his shoes clicking against tile, the sound bouncing between the walls. It led him to a supply closet. When he opened the door, nothing. Just shelves of gauze and bandages. Yet the smell inside was sharp and metallic, like ozone. After lightning, 4 weeks after the letter, Carter dreamed of Emily. Always the same vision. A girl in a white dress standing in the distance, her back turned. He would call out to her, and she would slowly begin to turn her head. But just before her face was revealed, he would wake drenched in sweat. In his testimony, Carter admitted something he never told the FBI. I don't believe Emily was taken to harm her. I believe she was taken because of what she is. And whoever wrote that letter, they weren't protecting me. They were protecting her. By 1998, Dr. Carter was an old man, retired, fragile, yet still carrying the weight of Emily Harper's disappearance, like a stone chained to his chest. He rarely spoke of it aloud, though the FBI file remained open, gathering dust in government archives. Then, after 52 years of silence, Emily's name resurfaced. A newspaper in Oklahoma City ran a story about a woman who had contacted their office, claiming she was Emily Harper. She said she had been taken as a child, raised under a new identity, and had pieced together fragments of her past through scattered memories. She refused to give her current name, but agreed to meet a reporter. The meeting never happened. According to the journalist, the woman canceled at the last minute, her voice trembling over the phone. They found me, she whispered, before hanging up. She vanished that very night, leaving behind no address, no workplace, not even a forwarding number. It was as though she had evaporated. When the story broke, Carter was both electrified and terrified. He contacted the journalist directly, demanding details. The reporter shared what little he knew. She was in her 50s, with pale skin, dark hair streaked with gray, and eyes so piercing they made you look away. Carter admitted in his letter that he felt a strange certainty this was Emily. But if so, why had she withdrawn? Why had she disappeared again after so many years? The FBI briefly reopened the case, questioning the reporter, digging through phone records, searching for the mysterious woman, but nothing surfaced. It was as if she had stepped out of the shadows, only to retreat back into them. And then, the nightmares began again. Carter wrote that, in the weeks following the 1998 incident, he woke often at 3:15 a.m., always to the same sound, a knock at his front door. When he looked through the peephole, no one was there, but in the reflection of the glass, he swore he saw a woman standing behind him in the hallway. Her outline was faint, but unmistakable. A white dress, long dark hair, eyes like black mirrors. Every night, the same knock. Every night, the same reflection. He never opened the door. And in his confession, he admitted the truth he had never spoken aloud. I think Emily came back to see me, but I don't know if she was still alive. By the early 2000s, Dr. Alan Carter was nearing the end of his life. His hair white, his body frail. But his mind, though dulled by age, remained shackled to the memory of Emily Harper. He described his final years as a slow unraveling. He still dreamed of her, always the same visions. A girl standing with her, back turned, or a woman in white knocking softly at his door. But dreams began bleeding into daylight. Carter often sat alone in his study, surrounded by medical journals and fading photographs. Yet he swore that the shadows in the room shifted when he wasn't looking, that the faintest sound of breathing filled the silence. At night, he would catch glimpses in the corner of his larger child, darting just out of view, bare feet padding across the floor. The guilt ate at him. He had saved hundreds of children, perhaps thousands, over his career. But it was the one he lost who defined him. Every patient I touched after 1946, he wrote, was a desperate attempt to undo my failure. But you cannot atone for a single sin by drowning it in good deeds. Emily's eyes never left me. Neighbors began to whisper. They said Carter talked to himself, that he left his lights on all night, that sometimes they saw him standing at his window long past midnight, staring into the street as if expecting someone to arrive. One winter, a visiting nurse reported something that chilled even her hardened heart. She found him in his bedroom, awake but motionless, his gaze fixed on the corner of the room. His lips moved in a whisper. When she asked who he was speaking to, he turned slowly toward her and said, "She doesn't like you being here." The nurse swore she felt the temperature drop instantly, her breath visible in the air. She never returned. Carter admitted that he no longer knew if Emily was alive, dead, or something in between. He wrote, "The night they took her, they didn't just steal a child. They stole something the world was never meant to understand. And I am the one who opened the door." In his final years, he would wake to the sound of footsteps padding softly through his home, always stopping at his bedroom door. He never found the courage to open it, and when he died in 2008, some said he was smiling. Others said his face was frozen in terror. Asterisk. After reading Carter's confession, I couldn't let the matter rest. The letter had burrowed into my mind like a splinter. I told myself it was professional curiosity, but the truth was simpler. I felt the same gnawing obsession Carter had described. Emily Harper's absence was a wound that had never healed, and now I was reopening it. I combed through archives, police records, and faded newspapers. The tornado of 1946, the kidnapping, Ella Harper's survival, the dead-end FBI reports, each fact aligned with Carter's words. Nothing about his testimony was fabricated, and yet, the trail ended where it always had, with Emily vanishing into the night. But then strange things began happening. The first time was in the library itself. The night I discovered the letter. I heard it then, a child's laugh, faint, brittle, echoing between the stacks. I told myself it was fatigue. But when I returned weeks later to dig deeper into Wilburton's records, I heard it again. A soft laugh, followed by the sound of paper fluttering from the shelves. When I turned, the aisle was empty. At home, the disturbances followed me. I'd wake at 3:15 a.m. to the sound of knocking, 3 gentle raps on my door. Once, I found My front door ajar, though I had locked it tightly before bed. Another night, as I prepared slides on pediatric trauma, my computer flickered and froze. Across the screen, for a single second, appeared two words. She's here. I told no one. Who would believe me? And yet the evidence grew darker. I located Emily Harper's file. She had lived her life quietly, changing her name after adulthood, but she died in 1991 of a sudden cerebral hemorrhage. The report noted something peculiar. Ella's final words, recorded by a nurse, were, "Tell Emily I'm sorry." I tried. I stared at those words for hours. One night, while poring over Carter's letter again, I noticed something I hadn't before. Faint indentations on the paper as though another note had once been written atop it. I shaded over the surface with a pencil. Slowly, letters emerged. 4 words, etched faintly, but unmistakable. "Do not follow Emily." The room chilled instantly. And from the corner of my eye, I saw her just for a moment. A girl in a white dress, standing in the hallway, her face hidden by shadow. When I turned fully, she was gone. The deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't simply a mystery. It was a wound that refused to close, festering across decades. Emily Harper was more than missing. She was present. Somewhere. Somehow, I could feel it. The night it all came to a head, I was in my office long after midnight. The hospital hallways outside were silent, sterile, lit only by the faint glow of exit signs. Carter's letter lay on my desk, alongside Ella's final words, alongside my own scribbled notes. My hands trembled as I pieced them together like fragments of a nightmare. They only wanted Emily. She has found a new family. Tell Emily I'm sorry. Do not follow Emily. Each phrase was less a clue than a warning. But from whom? And why? That was when the lights in my office flickered. Once, twice, then died completely, plunging the room into darkness. I froze. From the hallway came the soft sound of footsteps, bare feet against linoleum, slow, deliberate. My throat went dry. I wanted to call out, to demand who was there, but no sound came. The footsteps stopped at my door. 3 soft knocks. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The silence pressed down like a weight. Then, slowly, the handle turned. The door creaked, opened just enough to reveal the shape of a small figure. A girl. Her white dress glowed faintly in the dark. Her hair fell over her face. And though her features were hidden, I felt her eyes on me, sharp and heavy as a blade. "Emily," I whispered. The figure tilted its head. Then, in a voice that was not a child's but something older, deeper, it spoke a single word. "Why?" The lights flickered back on. The hallway was empty. The door stood wide open. I sank into my chair, my body trembling. Carter's final words echoing in my mind. "Some secrets follow you for a lifetime." But I wonder now if he was wrong. Some secrets don't just follow you. Some secrets wait. And Emily Harper is still waiting. Where, I cannot say. But when the clock strikes 3:15, and the knocking begins again, I know it's only a matter of time before she comes for me too. Asterisk.